everybody, I'm Rob. This is the Comic Book Chronicles interview. And folks, my guest today is a Jewish representation expert and a comic book historian who goes by the online moniker Jewish Comics Queen. And that makes her the perfect person to serve as one of the editors for CHUTZPAH, a Jewish celebration in comics. Sasha Kaplan is online. Miss Sasha, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you for being here. Okay, so Jewish Comics Queen. How did you become such a firm advocate for Jewish representation in not just comics, but popular culture in general, right?
Everybody needed a hobby during the pandemic.
There you go.
It kind of started just looking at, rewatching films like School Ties and just like reading comics and realizing that like Jewish representation is like it exists, but it's not often done spectacularly. Mm-hmm. And there's it actually started with wanting to explore the concepts to see like the ordinary anti-Semitism.
Okay.
Right? Not the Nazi anti-Semitism, the sort of average everyday kind of bigotry and prejudices. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to see what films explored that. And there were very few that did so. School Ties, again, with Brendan Fraser being probably the best example. And then from there, I started looking at, films and TV shows and movie and comics that I knew had Jewish characters. And it just kind of spiraled from there. Because comics was the first love, right? So I started looking at, the Jewish superheroes and like Marvel Comics. And then, the films, the TV shows, it all just kind of became this big thing.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about, well, first of all, let's define chutzpah, because forgive me, I'm not of Jewish descent. I've heard that word before. Tell me what it means.
So that's a complicated question because I think like a lot of Yiddish words, it's open to a bunch of, there's been a lot of different definitions. I've heard it described as tenacity, sort of like bravery, but in a kind of a risky kind of way. Okay. Somebody who's very bold, has a lot of chutzpah in them. I think it's somebody who is unapologetic in who they are.
Okay.
I think to have chutzpah is to be, have a certain pride in who you are as a person, and to express that. So I think I have a lot of chutzpah. It takes a lot of gall, a lot of tenacity, a lot of bravery to put yourself out there on the internet and talk about Jewish representation in any capacity.
And I mean, are people, I'm almost scared of what you're about to say, but do people react favorably to it? Or is it kind of that usual, you get a batch of the good, you get a batch of the bad? I mean, how are you received when you do that?
I mean, this is the internet, so
yeah.
I would say it's maybe like 70-30, maybe 80-20, 80% positive, 20% negative.
Okay.
I think I also just like, I have no tolerance for engaging with trolls. And I think at one point I said very quickly that like trolls and anti-Semites get blocked. I'm not playing games. I'm not interested in, there's a point where you can change hearts and minds.
Yeah.
And you can have a conversation with a person and help them see your point of view on something. But there are people who are not interested in engaging in good faith. Mm-hmm. And I just like, I have a life outside of the internet. I don't have the energy to devote to engaging with people who are only here to fuel fires of bigotry.
Mm-hmm. To your end, you are putting yourself out there, and you're not the only one, because you're an editor on CHUTZPAH, a Jewish celebration in comics, issue 2 of which is up on Kickstarter now. And again, you can visit the campaign at the URL on your screen and in the description. What's CHUTZPAH about, and who's contributing to it?
So CHUTZPAH started with Daniel Kalbin and a conversation apparently that we had at Baltimore Comic Con a couple of years ago, where we were talking about how there's been a lot of different anthology series in Marvel and DC. and we were really discussing, like, it'd be cool to have a Jewish anthology, but we weren't sure that Marvel and DC kind of had that on their wavelength. And we kept trying to Daniel kept talking about it. And I was like, wait a minute, Daniel, I said to him, why don't you just do it? And I had no recollection of this conversation until he had mentioned it in one of the CHUTZPAH team meetings.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't remember. And he's like, Sasha, you told me to go for it. I said, I did. I said, okay, this is all you. You take the credit. So he brought on, Arden Shore, who's our editor-in-chief. He brought in Andy Shaggy Cordy, who has an incredible array of experience in the industry. I think he's worked in just about every facet of it. Arden is an incredible writer. He's a filmmaker. Daniel is the author of American Dreams and many other comics. And then there was me. And I'm just I describe myself as a semi-professional comic book nerd.
Okay.
I'm an academic. I'm good at, schmoozing and, talking to people and getting the word out, but I wasn't sure what I could bring to the table. And the more we started working on the first issue, the more I was like, okay, there is stuff that I can bring to the table. Absolutely. I can bring, my work ethic, my organizational skills, my marketing skills to the table for that. And the first issue, we kind of talked to the creators that we knew, creators that, to see what could happen. Yeah. And the first issue was a great success. And the second issue, which is now in Kickstarter, we actually had essentially open submissions. So anybody, we had like a form people filled out, and right after Passover, right before Passover, so April-ish, we sat down and we kind of went through all the submissions, and we noticed that quite a few of the submissions had this historical, biblical Jewish theme to it. Mm-hmm. And we said, oh, this is really cool, because it just organically happened. We weren't looking for specifically historical or biblical stories. Right. We just wanted these stories to be positive. We wanted them to uplift Jewish voices. We wanted them to be unapologetic in its Jewishness. And we wanted to make sure that the representation was of quality storytelling. Mm-hmm. And that's what we got with all of these incredible submissions. And the stories are so different and interesting, and they're positive, and they're a little funny, and they're introspective, and they're contemplative. And I've run out of adjectives at this point because it's such a cool array of stories that we have for this project.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you were nice enough to send me the first issue earlier today. And, what I found interesting is you do have that sort of mythical, biblical element to it, but then you've also got a very down-to-earth, grounded element to it as well. You've got a story about a man who goes to confessional. You've got a story about speed dating. It just, there's different components to it. And I don't know what I expected going in, but I mean, I was very pleasantly, I don't want to say pleasantly surprised, but I mean, it spoke to me and it moved me.
And that's kind of the magic of what CHUTZPAH is trying to achieve, because I've heard the mantra if you make something too Jewish, then it won't be relatable enough. And I don't like that concept. I think that just because a story is not about me or my people doesn't mean it's not relatable. Right. Right. So I found a lot to relate to in many stories. Mm-hmm. Of various different groups of people. And so I hope that with this project, we give a little insight into Jewish culture and Jewish experience, which is incredibly diverse. Mm-hmm. And we also provide a lot of things that are, very relatable, like the woes of dating, or, what it means to kind of go through a culture and not sure where you fit in within it. A lot of people have experienced that. And so what was really cool, I think, about the first issue is just how different in tone, in style, all of the issues were. Absolutely. And now what's really cool about the second issue is that we kind of have this semi-coincidental theme going. And it's just so cool because the stories, again, are all kind of different in tone. There's an adventure story. There's an archaeological story. There's a story about moms. And wow. I think they're all relatable and all have motifs that would resonate with anyone.
And that's a beautiful thing. And, at the risk of it being self-explanatory, going back to your role, can you explain to us what you do as an editor on CHUTZPAH? I mean, what does a comic book editor do, at least in this capacity? Because I think a lot of people, they know what a writer does, they know what an artist does. What does an editor do, at least in this instance?
So the term editor can kind of be a little bit of an umbrella term.
Okay.
It can be a lot of different things. So in my capacity as an editor for CHUTZPAH, I've kind of taken on that more marketing role.
Okay.
I've taken on the role of kind of a project manager. So we all work together. So when we get funded, we're going to say when, right? Mm-hmm. So when we're funded, we'll have deadlines for script submissions. Okay. So that's when all the writers will need to bring the scripts to us. We're going to look at all of these scripts. We're going to discuss them. We're going to make sure that if there's any biblical or religious elements, that they are accurate. Mm-hmm. If there's something that isn't working, we, provide feedback to the writers so that they can make necessary edits. So it's about just kind of ensuring that the stories are all, as well written as the people that are writing them. Mm-hmm. And that everything kind of makes sense, that the religious elements are accurate, the history is as accurate as, is reasonable for a comic book, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where I would be. And then Arden Shore, our editor-in-chief, kind of has the final decision on some of the edits that we may suggest. And then, we set deadlines for kind of every piece of the puzzle. Then we'll go, work to put the book together. So, the writers and artists essentially put together these beautiful stories.
Yes.
And then we bring them all together.
Excellent. Okay, so you're kind of I don't want to say you're a catch-all, but you do a variety. You wear a variety of different hats in addition to the marketing end, the proofreading end, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's true for everyone involved. Daniel's become he's the Kickstarter expert. Every time because I knew nothing about Kickstarter when this started. Right. I knew that people donated money and then, people sent out comics once they were funded. That's all I knew. Okay. So I am so fortunate to have been part of this because I have learned so much from Daniel. I've learned so much from Andy about layouts and how dialogue is added to comics. I've learned so much just about productions and budgets and writing from Arnon and the entire team. So I am very humbled before them, and I'm so honored to be a part of this.
I was going to say, because had you worked on a comic book in an official capacity before this at all? No,
this is the first one. So the first issue was my comic book debut. Okay. And what's really cool about the second issue is that one of our writers, Michal Schick, is making her comic book debut as one of our writers for the second issue.
Excellent. So you're sort of getting to bring new Jewish voices to the table as well as already established ones. Definitely,
because, I think we all know comics are for everyone.
Yes.
And I think there's always someone who's an up-and-coming artist or writer who wants to give it a shot. And, if we can provide space for Jewish creators to be able to tell Jewish stories, especially at a time where not everybody wants to see or hear pitches for Jewish stories, it makes me happy that we can provide that space.
Talk to me a little bit more about issue 2. Who's contributing to the issue? What are we looking at from a storytelling perspective? What's on the Kickstarter right now?
Great question, I say, as I briefly turn my head towards the Kickstarter. So we do have a couple of returners. We have Josh Edelglass. So he wrote, I think, the first story in the first issue.
Yes.
He's coming back with a story called Moshe on the Mountain. So it's about Moses. How he finds his way back to his faith after witnessing the golden calf and the smashing of the Ten Commandments. And he's sitting there and trying to he's having a little bit of an existential crisis.
Okay.
Michelle Garfinkel has a story about mothers, which is this timeless, beautiful story about a Jewish mother in Syria writing a letter to her son who's in Cairo, and it's set during in the pre-Crusades period.
Okay.
And something Michelle said in her promo video, which I really loved, is that she talks about how, despite the fact that the story takes place very far back in time, the messaging and motif of it is incredibly timeless, because ultimately it's just a mom writing a letter to her son because she misses him.
Yeah.
We have a really cool archaeological story from Michal called Babitha. So an archaeologist discovers the ancient cache of papers belonging to Babitha Bat Shimon and promoting her, it prompts her spirit, essentially, her essence, to tell the story of her very dramatic life, so that's going to be really cool. Alex Schumacher has a story called Backyard Maccabee, which he describes as an imaginative young Maccabee wannabe saving his mother from an invasive threat while helping her with yard work.
Okay.
What I really like about this story, and I love all of the stories that we picked, is that there's a really cool element of childhood wonder in a very Calvin and Hobbes kind of style.
Okay.
We also have how King Solomon outsmarted a worm for God. So this is Stephen A. Gordon and Rob Kuttner, two individuals with incredible work in film and animation and comics.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a comic adaptation of a specific midrash tale, specific biblical tale about how King Solomon embarked on a quest underground, overseas, and into the demonic realm to find a legendary worm capable of building the temple.
Okay.
So that just it is incredible. I light up every time I get to talk about this. And we have a story that started in the first issue that's continuing in the second issue by Paul Axel, which is about two cousins meeting up. They're both serving in the U.S. Army during World War II.
Right. And
they decide to have a little Hanukkah celebration amongst the snow and, the U.S. Army tents.
Okay.
And, if we surpass our funding goal, there may be another story from Daniel, which will be really, really cool. So, if you want to hear more about these stories, obviously go to the Kickstarter page, and you can also, contribute to the story. And the more money we raise and the more you spread the word, the more Jewish stories we can tell. And, the Daniel's story is titled The Blade of Jerusalem. Like, that already sounds so cool to me. So, if we surpass our goals, then you can hear that story or read that story too.
Sasha, do you think that people realize how important representation is, not just in comics, but in media in general? Because, I think a lot of people who look like me, quite frankly, they see a lot of characters that look like them. But then for me personally, when I had my daughters, I started to realize, and see how they looked at other female characters. I work in the public eye. I've seen a lot of people of color wearing Miles Morales gear. I mean, whether you're talking religious faith, color of your skin, gender, do you think people understand how important representation can be?
I think people might not necessarily understand how powerful representation can be, but I think people is a very big umbrella term. I think some people are just bigots and do not want to see anybody but themselves represented on TV.
Fair.
But the conversations that have happened in the last, 25, 30 years,
mm-hmm.
have created a lot of new opportunities. And I think, although representation cannot end bigotry.
No.
Although I can dream. I think what it can do is that it can bring perspective.
Okay.
Because if you are living in somewhere very rural and you don't know anybody else except the people in your church and in your community who look like you and talk like you and believe the same things you do, you don't know what the rest of the world looks like. So your only sort of glimpse into other things is through the internet, through film, through television, through pop culture.
Yeah.
And so if we tell positive stories about the Jewish community, the African American community, the LGBTQ community, women, Hispanic and Latino people all over the world,
yeah,
we can provide a perspective. And does that mean that this person is not going to be a bigot or say the wrong thing? No. But it might make them think just a little bit more about, about how their perception, their false perception, presumably, is then, you're sort of piercing through their perception of reality to show that maybe they had it wrong. Maybe they don't know everything about the experience of this community. And I did not know anything about, American pop culture as a kid. And so I learned English and I learned how to American culture through film, through television. And it's not an exact, accurate realm.
No.
But I think it helps form connections. And if you see people that don't look like you on TV, maybe it'll make you think twice about what you hear about that particular community in the news or on social media. Maybe you're going like, that doesn't sound right. Because, it's not going to fix our problems, but I think it can provide a much needed perspective. Does that make sense? Is that...
Absolutely. And well said. But, the thing about this is that can go in the positive direction, but it can also go in the negative direction. Yeah. And I was looking for a way to sort of connect this with people who would be watching me and, comic books and that kind of deal. And I found one on your Threads page, interestingly enough. I think it was, at the time of this recording, it was a couple of days ago, you put up, "Can we stop erasing Magneto's Jewish identity?" I think it was Magneto's Jewish history. Mm-hmm. What did you mean by that? What did you see that prompted you to talk about that?
Oh gosh, how much time do we have? So with all of the news coming out about X-Men castings and fan castings and who will be in the next X-Men movie and who will not be in the X-Men movie, I started seeing a lot of posts about the fact that anytime I talk about Magneto and how important it is that he is a Jewish Holocaust survivor, inevitably I get a almost bot-like responses of, we can't make him a Holocaust survivor because he's like 45 and he's gonna look young, and how do you explain a 100-year-old, Holocaust survivor who looks like he's, 45 or 50. Right. To which I say Mystique and Wolverine are like well over 100. I don't remember anybody complaining about Mystique's lack of aging. No. Or the fact that Wolverine managed to fight in pretty much every war of the 20th century and still look, relatively young. But sure, we draw the line at the fact that Magneto's connected to a very important historical event.
Right.
The other argument that I saw, and I'm going to be very honest, I don't get offended easily, but this is an argument that genuinely offends me. Okay. Is when people act like you can just take Magneto's backstory and trauma and the history that's associated with it and substitute it for another genocide or horrific event. Okay. Because I find this offensive for two reasons. Number one, I think it is incredibly offensive to whatever other horrific event you substitute it with, because it essentially suggests that all genocides and all experiences are essentially interchangeable. Right. And you can compare them historically, you can compare the mechanisms, you can compare the events and how these things were carried out. Mm-hmm. But the trauma and experiences of those things in many ways is unique to that event. Does that make sense?
You can't paint it with a universal brush.
You really can't. And I think suggesting that that genocides are interchangeable, that horrific events are just one size fits all and can just be substituted one for another, is incredibly offensive to, I think, anybody who has intergenerational trauma, to anybody who's a victim of these horrific events. On the other side of that, on the Jewish side, you're essentially telling me that the Holocaust doesn't matter, even though the scale of it, the sheer horror of it, was in many ways beyond is in many ways unfathomable, right?
It's beyond comprehension almost.
Yeah. So it's frustrating because it feels like it's kind of taking representation away, saying here, you guys don't need representation. I would never want to take representation from others. I think Magneto's story and the way that it has been told in comics in various different iterations and in the films, I think it works for anybody who has connection to that period of history. And I think it also comes from a place of people acting like, the Holocaust doesn't matter anymore, or it was so long ago. And usually the people that say that are the people that kind of need to learn more about it.
Yeah. It's such a weird argument to make. Like, and it's a double standard in terms of let's just erase this part of his story, but there's all these different comic book fantasy machinations that could make it work. Like, why just him, you know?
Yeah, and usually what's the word? The tenacity, the fervor with which they do so is just a lot of energy, because honestly, like, it's comic books. Like, characters have been aged, de-aged, re-aged, flung forward in time, flung back in time. There's been so much wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey shenanigans happening in comics. And with all of the multiversal stuff with the MCU, and who knows what the MCU will look like after this.
Sure.
But we accept all of these random shenanigans, but we draw the line at Magneto being a Jewish Holocaust survivor, because I think it comes ultimately from a very fundamental misunderstanding of the mechanisms and events that led to those horrors.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, Miss Sasha, I love your perspective. I love CHUTZPAH as a project. I hope that a lot of people get to see it. Again, you can check CHUTZPAH out at the URL on your screen. Anything else you'd like to add, Miss Sasha?
If you care about good storytelling, helping new voices break containment and tell stories, like, give it a follow, give it some support, and hopefully we can have bigger and brighter and more diverse and more incredible stories than the incredible stories we already have in the future.
Sasha Kaplan, ladies and gentlemen.